Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, we're going to be kicking off our season preview content on the channel, first talking about the BC Lions. And these videos won't be as in-depth as they have been the last couple of years, just with everything going on with other projects, such as the top 50 countdown I have going on. I just didn't have the time to dedicate it to this year. With going over every single player on every single team like I did the last couple of years. So we're going to be taking more of an overview look at each team and kind of predicting just some general things about them. So starting off with where this team finished last year, they finished 12-6, finished second in the West, and ultimately lost in the West Final to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. By all means, a very successful season, just magical at certain points, with how Nathan Rourke was playing out there and just how so many members of this team really stepped up their game. Their first playoff win in several years, I do believe. And I thought they just had some really positive momentum behind this organization. First year under new owner Amar Doman as well. So a lot of positive energy going in towards this season here in 2023. But this is when you have to talk about their off season. And for each team, I'm just going to go over who I think is going to be the most impactful addition and who I think is going to be the most impactful loss that they had this offseason. And for their most impactful loss, we'll just start with that because this one is obvious. And that is quarterback Nathan Rourke, who goes to the NFL's Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously had a magical season last year, was well on his way to winning the league's MOP award before his injury. Ended up coming back and actually winning a playoff game for the team, and ultimately it was just such a great season for Nathan Rourke, and it's really going to be hard for this team to replicate his star power. Yes, Vernon Adams and Dane Evans are, fine candidates to be starting quarterbacks for this team this year, but I don't think they have that high-level upside that Nathan Rourke possesses. I don't think almost any quarterback in the league possesses that, so you're obviously going to have a downgrade at some level at that quarterback position. So that's going to be something to watch, who ends up starting the majority of the games this year, Vernon Adams or Dane Evans. I think between them, you have a pretty good quarterback situation, but obviously a downgrade from last year. I think their biggest addition was defensive end Shawn Lemon, who they bring over from the Calgary Stampeders, last year's West Division nominee for most outstanding defensive player. And I think that is kind of their way forward this year. Maybe take a step back on offense, but on defense, increase their potential, their upside. I think they're going to be able to rush the passer a lot better. Even though I think their defensive line played very well in spurts last year, had a really good healthy rotation. This gives them a very proven go-get-a-sack guy in key moments, and I'm really excited to see what Lemon brings to the table this year. I liked a lot of other additions that they had, but like I said, just want to keep it to the one player for these videos. Now, looking at their roster, I have their offense ranked as the 5th offense in the CFL, which may surprise some people, but I think that the running back position is a big question mark. They currently don't have anybody with CFL experience on the roster, and it looks like they're going to go into the season that way. Offensive line, it's not the weakness it was a couple of years ago for them. I thought, last year was a big step forward for them in that regard, but still not one of the better offensive lines in the league. I think that we'll talk about it in a second, but I think there's one particular weakness we have to look out for with that. But I think the skill position players, the quarterback position, pretty good for this team, especially the receivers. The receivers are really the strength of this offense. So I really do like the BC Lions roster on offense going forward, but I do like their defense better. I actually have their defense ranked 3rd in the CFL, behind a couple of other teams, but I do think they have the potential to be the best defense in the CFL next season. I think they have the best secondary in the league. Just so much experience back there, not just with TJ Lee and Gary Peters, but other guys like Marcus Sales, Mike Jones they bring in from free agency from Montreal. I think that those additions are going to be a big factor. Those defensive line additions like Shawn Lemon, like I mentioned before, I think is going to make a big difference for this team. I think the linebacking core is just very solid, especially you're starting 2 Canadians there, so you can start Americans in different spots. I think that Holadik and Lacombo is a really good combo there. I didn't mean to rhyme that. At the linebacker position for BC. And I think that, like I said, I think over last year, I think with the addition of Lemon, this increases the upside of this defense. I think it has the ability to create some more turnovers. It was doing that a lot last year, but I think it really has the potential to be the best defense in the league. I really do feel that way. Now, looking at their Canadian talent, I have them ranked fourth, which is a big improvement over last year. A lot of this has to do with, I think they've really invested more into the prospects on the offensive line. Noah Zaire, they drafted last year. They bring in Michael Couture from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in free agency. I think that's a big aspect that was really lacking for this team before. Suk Chung, you've seen a rebound at that position. So I think that's a big reason for why their Canadian ranking goes significantly up for me over last year. I think they're still missing that, great Canadian receiver. Javon Cotoy is a nice player, but I don't think he doesn't really have that much versatility, in my opinion, kind of that tight end type body, a good red zone threat, but I think, in terms of the overall all-around game, not the best Canadian receiver in the league, or not one of the best Canadian receivers in the league. So something to watch out for there, but I think on the defensive line, you got Matthew Betts, you got David Menard, really good, healthy rotation with those guys. They're probably going to start a Canadian defensive tackle with Nathan Cherry, who they drafted last year. So I think it's a very talented team in terms of its Canadian talent. And like I said, that improvement on the offensive line is a big reason why it ranks higher this year for me. And looking at their strengths and weaknesses, I think the strength of this roster is, like I said, the defense. I really feel very highly about this defense going into this year. But I also feel very highly about their wide receiver talent. Despite losing Brian Burnham in free agency, they still have Lucky Whitehead. They still have, I'm blanking on their guys right now, Keon Hatcher, Javon Cotoy, like I said. They have 3 or 4 really talented American receivers. Cotoy's Canadian, but you get my point. It's a very talented wide receiver room. Was super explosive last year. I thought this team was even good at receiver before Nathan Rourke got there, so it's not influenced by him leaving whatsoever. I think this is a very talented group, especially with Lucky Whitehead being one of the more unique receivers in the league with that speed element. So honestly, at the end of the day, I think those are the strengths that are going to carry this roster, the defense and the skill positions at the wide receiver position. And then for their weakness for this roster, I mentioned that they don't have any running backs on the roster that have any CFL experience, so that's obviously going to be a question. But obviously, if you're going to have a weakness at one spot in the Canadian Football League, it's got to be running back, because some teams don't even really use their running backs that often, and it'll be interesting to see how BC deploys theirs this season. But I also think offensive tackle is a big need for them, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they solve that throughout camp. They do have Kent Perkins to play that right side, but that left tackle position is a glaring need. They do bring in Klish Luger from the Montreal Alouettes in free agency, but he's more of a replacement level guy in my opinion. They did have Joe Figueroa there last year, but he departs in free agency to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So it's going to be a big question whether or not they can get good high-level play out of that position this year. And I think that offensive line improvement was a big reason for their success last season. So we'll be interested to see if they take a step back in that regard this year. That left tackle spot is what I'm watching for weaknesses on this roster. So for each of these teams, I also wanted to take a look at their opening schedule to the season, their first 5 or 6 weeks or so. So starting at week 1, BC plays at Calgary in the season opening game, and this should be an excellent game. All the games, except for the playoff game, ironically, between these two teams were great last year, and I'm very excited to see what happens in this matchup with, the new look Lions. Actually, the Lions are pretty well the same, but I think, there's some obvious differences with Rourke not being there. So it'll be interesting to see how the Vernon Adams-led Lions play against the Stampeders. There were a couple of those matchups when Rourke was hurt last year, and the Lions did win one dramatic one. That was one of the better games of last year. So really excited for that. Great opening week game. Then they're home against Edmonton. That should be, in theory, a win. They really played well against Edmonton last year. Week 3, they're at Winnipeg. That is going to be a really tough matchup for anybody in the CFL, so we'll see how they come out of those first 3 weeks. If they lose both games to Calgary and Winnipeg, will be interesting to see. Then they're at Toronto. Always a pretty good game in recent years between BC and Toronto, weirdly enough. I think that, Toronto found a way to win last year, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in that matchup. So 3 of the first 4 games on the road for BC this year, and then week 5 there are versus Montreal, which I do believe would be a victory for them. So at the end of the day, I think that is a pretty manageable roster to begin the year. They have 3 games on the road, but at the end of the day, they should be able to get off to, a pretty decent start, even if they only get 2 wins out of that. Not going to be the end of the world. I just don't think they're going to be, tanking out of the gate going 0-5. So I'm really excited to see what they do the first part of the season there. And for their general prediction, I'm going to be doing a full predictions video like always on the channel right before the season. So I won't give you my exact place where they're going to finish in the standings. I'm just going to give you guys a win range for each of these teams. And for the Lions, I think it's between 9 and 11 wins. I think this is fair. I think this team has a very solid floor. I don't think they're going to completely, fall back and, be a below 500 team this year. I think their floor is really 9-9 because of the talent they have on this roster, having 2 somewhat quality, experienced quarterbacks. But I don't think they're going to reach the 12 wins that they did last year, just simply because of, not having that star power at quarterback that they had last year with Nathan Rourke. So I think that 11 wins, probably the ceiling for them. I think they're closer to 11 wins than they are to 9. At the end of the day, I think that is where I see them finishing this year. And with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this preview of the 2023 BC Lions. Be sure to let me know what you guys think of the team going into this season. Do they get back to the 12-win season that they had last year? Does this team take a step forward and go to the Grey Cup game this year? Be sure to let me know. And with that said, hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.